What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host, and my name is John, and we are back with episode 70, where we will be analyzing and predicting the UFC on ESPN 5 card going down this Saturday, August 3rd, 2019, headlined by Colby Covington versus Robbie Lawler. This event takes place in Newark, New Jersey from the Prudential Center, with the 6-fight prelim card kicking off at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN, and the 6-fight main card kicking off at 3 p.m. Eastern Time also on ESPN. So all 12 of this weekend's fights will be on ESPN, the main cable channel. Looking at this card top to bottom, it's kind of an underwhelming card even by fight night standards, but when you realize that the UFC didn't even have a location for this event about 6 or 7 weeks ago, it really explains why some of the matchups are a little bit lower level in this one, and all things considered, the UFC mustered up a pretty decent card on that short notice. So starting things off with the first of 12 fights, we are in the women's flyweight division, where we have Mara Romero Borella, who is 12-5, taking on Lauren Murphy, who is 10-4. The opening betting line for this one was Borella minus 190, Murphy plus 150. Right now we are seeing minus 185 Borella plus 160 Murphy. So the line has stayed just about the same. There was actually some early action that came in on Murphy in this one right when the line came out, but it was quickly bet back down to minus 185 and hasn't moved much since. Kind of expected. It's a tough fight to bet. I do not really think there's much value on either fighter at this point. It's kind of a pass for me in the betting window, but I will do my best to break down how I think it's going to play out. So we'll start things off with Borella. I believe she is the better fighter of the two. She's had the more success in the UFC. She's coming off a victory over Talia Santos, where she looked pretty good in that fight. And she also gave Katlyn Chookagian a pretty tough fight where she hung in the kickboxing with Katlyn Chookagian, who's a really skilled kickboxer. She has a quick first-round submission over Kalinja Faria. So I would definitely say that Romero Borella's career in the UFC has been off to a better start. Murphy, she's been in the UFC for longer, but she's also lost way more fights. She is 2-5 in the UFC. Lost her most recent fight to Sijara Eubanks. She was thoroughly outstruck in that fight. She was taken down a few times. She just constantly moves backward. This is Murphy, and she doesn't really have much counter punching. So she's not the hardest, or she is a little hard to take down. She does have good takedown defense. Eubanks did have some trouble getting her down, but eventually did get her down. Murphy tends to play like rubber guard and attack submissions off of her back, but isn't really too successful with them most of the time. I don't see them working here on Borella because Borella is a pretty high-level grappler. So on the feet, I think Borella will be pressuring Murphy. Murphy's going to be backing up and not really having an answer to counter with. So on the feet, I expect Borella to be the better striker. And once it gets to the ground, I expect Borella, the one, to be hitting takedowns. I see Borella hitting top position. Her top position is really good. Once she gets you to the ground, I don't see Murphy getting up if that's the case. I see either Borella winning rounds in top pressure, hitting big ground and pound, or possibly even getting a submission on Murphy in this one. So wherever the fight goes, I'm pretty confident that Borella will be the one in control, and I'm going to pick Borella to get this one done. I'll go with just by decision because Murphy is tough. She is a bit crafty, and she could somehow pull this one off or last to the scorecards. But the pick for this one is going to be Borella, and I agree where the line is set. The next fight is in the flyweight division. We have Matt Schnell, who is 13-4, taking on Jordan Espinosa, who is 14-5. The opening betting line for this one was Schnell minus 120, Espinosa minus 120, and right now we are seeing Espinosa minus 120, Schnell plus 100. So the fight opened to pick'em. The early action came in on Espinosa. Matt Schnell actually went as high as plus 155 at one point, but then Money has steadily come in on Matt Schnell the past few weeks and pushed him down to actually a pick 'em again earlier in the week, but since then a little more action has come back on Espinosa. So it's a really close fight. People are betting both sides in this one, and I really see why, because both guys have passed to victory, and they both are very high level fighters. So I'm gonna start with Schnell. Schnell has very nice boxing. He's got extremely fast hands. His defense isn't the best. He can eat a few shots when he's getting a little emotional, trading punches in there. And that is why he has been knocked out a few times in the past. The fight that really worries me about Schnell is his fight with Hector Sandoval, where he was put in bottom position and was knocked out with some kind of pitter-patter ground and pound. It did not look like massive shots. It was kind of just some short punches, and was able to get the knockout on Schnell in that one. He's also been knocked out by Rob Font, but there's no shame in that loss. Font is a wicked striker. Schnell's really just found his home at flyweight lately. He's 3 wins in a row, coming off the best win of his career against Luis Smolka, where he was outboxing Smolka in that one, got a nice body lock takedown, almost hit a guillotine on Smolka, but transitioned to a triangle and got a very nice submission in that one against Smolka, who is a sensational grappler of his own. I was actually picking Smolka to win that fight by submission, but to my surprise, Matt Schnell was the one who got the sub in that one. The fight before that, he showed good composure, good cardio, outboxing Naoki Inoue to a decision. Really just won that fight with leg kicks, footwork, and just the better boxing of the two. So getting over to Espinosa, he's an orthodox fighter. He's got a lot of in and out movement. He's constantly bouncing around, throwing big blitzes of offense. He has good takedown defense. He's got good kicks. Got some real power in his right hand. He had a very nice Darce finish on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, and I believe the last minute of that fight. So he showed the ability to finish fights with 1 minute to go after a tough back and forth fight. That was a competitive fight versus Durdo, though. He got hit with a lot of left hooks in that fight, and I'm really worried about Espinosa's boxing defense, because he loads up on his strikes and he's kind of predictable coming into the pocket, and his defense is just not good when he comes in. And in his last fight, it was a decision victory over Eric Shelton, but Trevor Whitman pointed out on the commentary how reckless Espinosa was coming into the pocket, and I just really agree with him. He fights a little lackadaisical, like he's constantly bouncing around. He doesn't have good output. He's not the type to win rounds, really. I was actually kind of surprised he won that fight against Shelton, because it was just such a close fight. I could see the judges easily giving it to Shelton, but he doesn't really have a good style for winning rounds. He does have good power, and he could touch the chin of Schnell in this one, but I don't see it happening. I see Schnell actually being the one who is more likely to rock Espinosa, because when Espinosa is blitzing into the pocket, throwing reckless combinations, I think Schnell's going to be counterpunching. He's going to be the better boxer, and I think that he has a good chance at knocking out or rocking Espinosa, maybe even snatching up a submission if he has Espinosa rocked. So I'm liking Matt Schnell's chances in this fight, because I think he will be the better boxer on the feet, and that will lead to him winning the striking exchanges. And I think he should be the better grappler as well. I think if Schnell wants to hit offensive takedowns, he should be able to get Espinosa down. If Espinosa tries to hit takedowns, I think Schnell will get back to his feet or attack subs off his back. He's really dangerous. So the way that Espinosa wins this fight is he's going to have to presser Matt Schnell, get him on his back foot so his strikes in boxing isn't as effective, and he's going to have to attack the legs of Schnell, which Espinosa does do well. He has a very nice oblique kick. So if Espinosa is attacking those leg kicks, he's limiting the ability of Schnell. He has a chance at outstriking Schnell, keeping this fight on the feet, and landing the harder, cleaner shots of the fight. But I just don't see Espinosa being the type of guy to follow a disciplined game plan like that. I see Espinosa coming into the pocket recklessly, getting countered by Schnell, and Schnell either following up with the knockout or the submission. So I'm going to pick Matt Schnell to win inside the distance in this one. The next fight takes place in the welterweight division. We have Claudio Silva, who is 13-1, taking on Cole Williams, who is 11-1. The opening betting line for this one was Silva, the favorite, at minus 400, with Cole Williams, the dog, at plus 280. Since then, more action has come in on the heavy favorite Silva, pushing to minus 440. Williams is now plus 350. No surprise here with Silva being the massive favorite. We got Cole Williams coming in here on short notice. It was supposed to be Claudio Silva versus Ramazan Emeev, but instead Williams is coming in here on short notice, and he really does not look ready at all. There is very little footage of Cole Williams on the internet. I only found 2 of his full fights. One fight was against an opponent named John Kennedy, where John Kennedy is 6-16, first of all, where Williams got an easy takedown on him. Kennedy had no wrestling defense at all, and Williams was able to just pound him out for the TKO victory in that fight. The second fight was a fight against a guy named Charlie Brown, I shit you not, and also another low-level opponent, 12-7 record, and Williams looked flabby in that fight. He had a gut on him. He didn't really have any muscles. It was a fight at 175, so he's going to have to cut some additional weight for this fight. And his activity is worrisome. He has only had 5 fights in the past 8 years, has Cole Williams. So I really think he was the only guy available, maybe in the area at this time, and they just needed a short notice replacement, and they gave him the call. And he just does not seem ready or worthy of being in the UFC at all. No disrespect to him. I'm sure he's a tough motherfucker and will come in here game to fight Silva, but I just do not think that he's going to have what it takes to come in here and knock out Silva, because Silva is actually a horrible fighter, to be honest. Like, his striking is terrible. He plots forward. His defense is non-existent. He gets tagged with punches nonstop. He gets hurt in almost all of his fights, but he's tough, man. I would give that to him. He is a zombie. He takes damage and keeps coming forward, keeps looking for takedowns, keeps looking for any type of grip he can get on you. And when he does that, he's dangerous because his jiu-jitsu is lethal. He's got incredible submissions, and even if he's down and out, even if he's on the verge of being knocked out, he can still possibly get you in a submission or attack a leg or get your back. He's really got good submissions. He was losing that fight to Nordin Taleb pretty heavily before he finally got the takedown, took Taleb's back and got the choke in round 1. He was getting rocked repetitively versus Danny Roberts, but Roberts was just stupid enough to follow him down to the floor every time and give Silva time to recover and attack subs. So Silva is beatable. He is very beatable. Anybody with good striking and decent sub defense and decent IQ, unlike Danny Roberts, should be able to beat Silva because he's so easy to hit. He is pretty chinny at this point in his career, and even though I said his submissions are lethal, it's not end-all be-all. He's not like a world-class jiu-jitsu guy. He's, a good black belt, but Danny Roberts was escaping submissions left and right in their fight, and Roberts is his belt level is a purple belt, but he trains with a great camp down in Florida with Hard Knocks 365 and Henry Hooft. He's got incredible training partners, and he was ready for that matchup. He was defending the submissions, the arm bars, the guillotines, the arm triangles, so it's entirely possible that Williams, his sub-defense is game, and he is able to avoid the submissions and get the knockout on Silva, but I just don't think that's likely. I think Silva's going to come in here, probably go for that desperate takedown that's not set up, maybe pull guard, get Williams down, and tap out Williams early. So the pick is going to be Silva by submission. The next fight takes place in the lightweight division. We have Scott Holtzman, who is 12-3, taking on Donghyun Ma, who is 16-9-3. The opening betting line for this one was Holtzman minus 285, Ma plus 205. Right now we are seeing even more action come in on the favorite Holtzman, down to minus 440. Ma is now plus 350. So exact same line as the last fight, coincidentally. And I agree with the line movement in this one again. And Holtzman is a very solid fighter. I will get into his skills later, but it really has a lot to do with just fading Donghyun Ma in this one. Ma fought Devontae Smith in his last fight, and he just looked terrible. He didn't commit to any strikes. He looked tentative. He looked like he really didn't want to fight too much. The first strike he really committed to was a telegraphed leg kick that Devontae Smith easily checked. It hurt Ma's leg. He started limping. He got countered with a 1-2, got rocked real bad, and got swarmed with some punches and finished off for the TKO. So it was a pretty pathetic performance. Ma wasn't able to land a single strike, really, and Smith put him out pretty easily. And Smith is a good fighter. He does have power in his hands, and I think he's actually a better striker than Holtzman. So I'm not saying it's going to be quite as easy for Holtzman, but with how Ma looked in his last fight, he did pick up a victory over Damian Brown not too long ago, back in 2018, but that was a low output, low intensity kickboxing fight against a guy, Damian Brown, who is just not on the same level as Holtzman right now. Although Brown is a very solid fighter, I think Holtzman is just really getting into his prime, even though he lost his last fight against Nick Lenz. It was a really, really close fight. It could have gone either way. Before that, picked up the best victory of his career against Alan Patrick, finishing him off in round 3 in that one as a big underdog. Holtzman's striking is pretty solid. He's got some power in his hands. He's got a very nice right kick that he goes to a lot, to the leg, to the body, to the head. He mixes it up very well. It's a very fast kick with no setup. His boxing defense isn't the best, but it should be solid enough to deal with Ma on the feet in this one. Ma can throw some power strikes from time to time. He's famous for his crazy fight against Marco Pollo Reyes a few years ago, but outside of that, he really has had a lackluster UFC career. He has been taken down multiple times before. I'm looking back to his Dominic Steele fight in 2015. It was a long time ago, but he did not do well defending the takedowns of Dom Steele in that fight. He was slammed multiple times in that fight. Was eventually knocked out with a slam. He got smashed with ground and pound on his back. He couldn't get off his back in that one. So if Holtzman is looking to pressure and look to get takedowns like he does against most of his fighters, I think he should win this fight easily. I don't see Ma being able to stop the takedowns or the pressure of Holtzman, and I see Holtzman dominating once he gets to the ground. But if the fight's on the feet, Ma does have a slight chance. He could lure Holtzman into a brawl, and he could touch the chin of Holtzman, because Holtzman boxing defense would probably be one of his biggest weaknesses. So that is Ma's path to victory, although I do not give it a high chance of happening. I think Holtzman is too calculated and too good of a fighter at this point to get drawn into a reckless brawl where he gets get caught by one of Dong Hyung Ma's wild punches. So I'm going to pick Holtzman to pressure Ma, be attacking that leg kick, probably outstriking him on the feet, and then eventually setting up the takedowns and probably getting the finish somewhere along in rounds 2 or 3 versus Ma, because I just did not see any animosity, any intensity in that fight from Devontae Smith. It looked like Ma just had no will to win, no will to throw anything hard in there. So he might be just grinding out fights in his contract to get a few more paychecks, but I was really unimpressed with Ma's last performance. Even though Holtzman lost his last fight, I'm still pretty high on the guy, so I'm pretty confident in Holtzman here, and that's why you're seeing that minus 440 price tag on his name. But where the line's at now, it's going to be dog or pass. The next fight takes place in the middleweight division. We have Gerald Meerschaert, who is 29-11, taking on Trevin Giles, who is 11-1. The open betting line for this one was Giles, the minus 125 favorite, Meerschaert minus 115. Right now, we are seeing Giles minus 165, Meerschaert plus 145. So much more action coming in on Giles here, and rightfully so, in my opinion. Gerald Meerschaert's fights kind of go the same way every single time. They're always super sloppy, back and forth brawls, and he does have insane toughness. He does have, an incredible chin. He gets rocked easily, but he's just hard to put away. He's been rocked in a lot of his fights, and he just takes damage and tires his opponents out, and he'll come back on you and defeat you. He did that against Oscar Pachoda, most notably. That was probably the most recent time that he did that. He had a very close decision versus Kevin Holland where he did not get the nod in that one. It was a fight that he could have won. He was hitting takedowns in that fight. It was a back-and-forth grappling fight where they were constantly going up and down in top position and taking each other down and taking each other's back and getting mount. It was a very sloppy fight, but that was against a guy in Holland who also fights very lackadaisical. He does not have high intensity in there. He has very lackluster takedown defense. He'll often let you take him down just because he's so confident in his bottom game. And it was a blessing for Holland that he won that decision, because I can't stand Kevin Holland, man. His fights are just so lackluster, and he gets gifted the decision every single time. I feel like it's happened a few times in a row. But the one thing that worried me in that fight about Meerschaert is he looked so tired. At the start of round 2, he was so tired. I've never seen a guy in more agony on his face than he was. I mean, he did get caught in a choke fairly early in that fight and had to fight out of it, and that could have, fucked up his cardio, but he just doesn't have good energy management. He swarms combos on the feet. He doesn't have much technique in his striking. He's got some good elbows, good knees, and he can be effective in some brawling scenarios, but he's just too wild and too untechnical for me to really like him at plus 145. And getting over to Trevin Giles, not the most technical or highest IQ guy himself. He was winning his last fight versus Zach Cummings, and he just got a little complacent, and he got rocked with the left hook. It was an overhand left. It was a big, massive overhand left from Zach Cummings that he just didn't see coming, unfortunately, even though Cummings wound up on it, and it was a huge punch coming out of left field. He got rocked, and then he got his neck snatched, and he got guillotined with about a minute left in that fight. He was probably up 2 rounds, probably on his way to winning the 3rd round, honestly. But he really didn't pay enough respect to Cummings, and he paid the ultimate price. Giles can hit his own double leg takedowns. He took down James Bochnowicz. He avoided submissions. Actually, was it Bochnowicz or was it Bohan Velokovic? Yeah, it was James Bochnowicz. So he avoided the submissions of James Bochnowicz. He was able to smash Bochnowicz on the ground and get the TKO from top position. On the feet, Giles has very solid boxing. He was lighting Braga Neto up with punches, has a really nice jab, has a really good 1-2, and in that fight, he used his energy efficiently. He didn't gas himself out. He respected his opponent the entire time, and he got the finish. And he didn't do that against Cummins coming off of that long layoff, and he, like I said earlier, he paid the ultimate price with getting his first loss in that fight. So despite Giles having that slip up in his last fight, I still think that he will be good enough to win this fight in this spot. On the feet, Giles should be lighting Meerschaert up, just jabbing his face off and outstriking him. I think Giles has the takedown defense and the solid enough wrestling base to avoid the takedowns of Meerschaert. If he does get taken down, though, that's when it gets interesting, because Meerschaert's path to victory is on the floor. Once the fight gets to the floor, and if Meerschaert's in top position, he has a great chance of winning the fight. He has really good submissions. He can take his opponent's back very well and possibly get the rear naked choke. And Giles has been taken down before versus Ryan Spann. He got his back taken for a few minutes in that fight, but he was able to escape the position. He was able to land solid ground and pound and actually steal the round back from Spann. And he did make another bit of a slip-up when he went for the takedown in that fight against Spann. He left his neck out and almost got guillotined, but it once more escaped the guillotine in that one. And he was able to just outgrind Spann in round 3, defend the takedowns, end in top position, and win the decision versus Spann in that one. So I honestly think that that's how this fight will go. Very similar to the Ryan Spann versus Trevin Giles fight from a few years ago, where Spann will be hitting takedowns on Giles. He will be putting Giles in bad positions, maybe taking his back or putting him in guillotines, but Giles is going to defend, and he's going to land big ground and pound, and he's going to make Meerschaert pay for going for the submission attempts. And it should be a real close fight. It should be a battle of who can get top position when Meerschaert's going for the takedowns. But I think Giles is solid enough and is good enough defensively on the ground to avoid the desperate attempts from Meerschaert. And I'm going to pick Giles to win by decision in this one. But it would not surprise me at all if Meerschaert is able to capitalize on a mistake from Giles, end in top position, ride out rounds, win rounds, and get the decision, or possibly tap out Giles again. So I would not pay chalk for Giles as a favorite in this one. I would like to see Meerschaert around plus 150 or higher. I mean, I guess you can bet on Meerschaert at plus 145. The value side is definitely on Meerschaert, but I just don't trust the guy with my money at this point. He's a little too lackadaisical and sloppy for me to pick him, and even as that plus 145 underdog. If he got up to plus 170 or higher, I would say that there's a little bit of value on him personally, but where the fight's at now, it's going to be a pass on both ends for me. The next fight takes place in the women's flyweight division. We have Antonina Shevchenko, who is 7-1, taking on Lucy Pudilova, who is 8-4. The opening betting line for this one was Shevchenko the favorite at minus 230, Pudilova plus 170. Right now we are seeing Shevchenko minus 135, Pudilova plus 115. So a ton of action has come in on Lucy Pudilova's way. The early action came in on Pudilova, and then some more action came back the favorite's way, and it was Pudilova was hovering around plus 150 or higher for a few weeks, but for the past week, steady money has come in on Pudilova. And I agree with the line movement in this one. Where the line's at now, I think that it's favored or pass, because I will outline why I think Shevchenko has the advantage, but I'm just going to go over their strengths and weaknesses real quick. Shevchenko, obviously the sister of Valentina, has a much longer frame. She's older than Valentina. I think she's getting up there in age, man, like 36, 37 years old for Antonina in this one. So and her last fight was her first professional loss. It was against Roxanne Modafferi, who is one of the more unathletic, less technical fighters in the division, and she was just unable to avoid the takedowns in that fight, was put on her back, not able to reverse position frequent enough. She was outstriking Roxanne on the feet, but when it came to the takedowns, she just could not stop Modafferi's grappling and lost that fight due to it. So luckily for Shevchenko, Pudilova is not much of the offensive grappler, although she has been working on her defensive grappling for her past few fights. That has been her weakness in the past. That's what she lost her most recent fights to Liz Carmouche for. So you got to think that Pudilova has been working a lot on her wrestling, and she might see Shevchenko's weakness on the ground and look to hit her own offensive takedowns for, I believe, the first time in the UFC. Most of her fights have been contested on the feet. Getting back over to Shevchenko real quick, she is not the greatest boxer. She really specializes in kicks and the clinch. Her clinch is so good. She comes from that Muay Thai background. She's strong and technical in the clinch, and she throws good knees, good elbows in the clinch, and a lot of the women she fight have trouble defending and getting it out of that clinch, and really just get brutalized once Shevchenko gets that Thai plum. It's really only in the grappling that Shevchenko has problems, and probably in the boxing as well. But I don't think Pudilova's boxing is quite good enough to give her a lot of problems. I mean, Pudilova does have solid boxing. She's got a good jab. She's got good defense. She's got good kicks, high output, good cardio. She's had that iconic fight against Irina Aldana, where it was just a 15 minutes non-stop kickboxing fight where they were punching each other in the nose non-stop and kicking each other's legs. So in my opinion, the best women's MMA fight of all time, and Pudilova was a huge part in that. She, if she wasn't a tough game opponent, that fight wouldn't have been possible. So I can see Pudilova's jab giving Shevchenko some problems, because they're both longer women and they're going to be looking to out-jab each other. So if this fight stays at range, I think Pudilova actually will win as long as it stays at kicking range, because I think that she can use her kicks effectively. She will be able to mix up her punches a little bit better, and she might even have that threat of the offensive takedown. But in the clinch, I'm going to give the clear advantage to Shevchenko in this one. Pudilova has struggled in the clinch. She did so versus Carmouche. It was a little bit different type of a clinch, because Carmouche was more so going for takedowns. But I think that once Shevchenko clinches up with Pudilova, then Shevchenko will start to win rounds. So it's a really close fight. It's almost a 50-50 type of fight. I would say 55-45 in favor of Shevchenko. So for all the people who got in on that action on Pudilova above +1 -130, I would say congrats to you, because that is a good snipe. It's a good line. But where the line's at now, I do not think there's much value left on Pudilova. I think it should be a razor close fight. It should really come down to obviously who can implement their game plan. Shevchenko is going to be looking to clinch up and do work with the knees and elbows, avoid the takedowns, and look to probably outstrike Pudilova at range too. But I think that Pudilova is going to surprise Shevchenko and is going to be way more competitive at range than Shevchenko expects. So I think Pudilova has the higher ceiling at this point in her career, because Shevchenko has been quite inactive throughout her MMA career. She is getting up there in age, and she's kind of in the shadow of Valentina her entire career. I imagine all the training that she really gets is kind of maybe 30-40% focused on her and 60-70% focused on her sister Valentina, who is the much better fighter. It's kind of an irrelevant narrative that I'm bringing up, but what I'm bringing up is I don't trust Shevchenko enough to lay the chalk on her. Even at this price of -135, it would be a pass on both ends. I expect this one to be a really competitive fight. I'm looking forward to it. It should be a high-level women's striking affair, and I'm going to slightly lean with the clinch game of Shevchenko to be able to win the rounds and get the decision versus Pudilova in this one. The next fight takes place in the welterweight division. We have Mickey Gall, who is 5-2, taking on Salim Touhari, who is 10-3. The opening betting line for this one was Mickey Gall, the favorite, at -190, Salim Touhari +150. Right now we are seeing Gall +105, Touhari -125. So the line has flipped, surprisingly. A lot of action coming in on Salim Touhari's way, and I'm going to disagree with the line movement in this one. I have no idea where this line movement is coming from. I actually do have an idea, but I think it's wrong. I think people are just fading Mickey Gall. They are seeing, even though he was -300 last fight versus Diego Sanchez, people were, as Daniel Levy on Twitter said it, people were rushing to the betting windows to lay that chalk on Mickey Gall versus the veteran Diego Sanchez, and now all of a sudden he's fighting Touhari, who's 0-2 in the UFC, has looked pretty unimpressive in his 2 fights, and all of a sudden he's the dog again. So I think that styles make fights, and I think that Gall has a solid advantage in this fight, because Touhari has just looked so lackluster in his UFC career. He is 0-2. He fought versus Warlley Alves and versus Guida Nakamura, and he lost both of those fights in low output, low intensity decisions. I love using that term because it defines a lot of fights where guys aren't trying to knock each other out. They're not trying to go out there and prove a statement. They're not trying to hurt their opponent. It seems like it was like Touhari was just point fighting in those fights and was content to lose. He actually got dropped by a left hook versus Guida Nakamura, and Nakamura is not a power striker at all. So I'm really just worried about Touhari's output at this point in his career. He seems like a solid fighter overall. He looked pretty good on the regional scene before he came to the UFC, but since he's come to the UFC, he hasn't shown anything that he's capable of winning a fight, even if it's against a low level opponent like Mickey Gall. Let's go over some of Mickey Gall's strengths and weaknesses. He's a very uncomfortable striker. He kind of just wings punches on the feet, just marches forward and throws bombs, and not really effective bombs. And he swarmed Diego Sanchez early, was trying to get him out of there, but wasn't able to do so. Maybe hit him with a few good shots, but really couldn't rock Sanchez. And then just had a huge adrenaline dump. He gassed out hard. He started getting taken down, getting smashed from bottom position, and eventually was TKO'd in round 2 of that fight. And Mickey Gall is a very high level grappler, but off of his back he is really ineffective. He has trouble getting off of his back. He's great from top position. He can hit a good offensive takedown. He can take your back. He's got very good rear naked chokes, but when he's in bottom, he's almost worthless. And if you look at the guys that he's choked out in the UFC so far, I think there's been 3 of them, right? And it has been CM Punk, Mike Jackson, and George Sullivan. Oh, and Sage Northcutt. So Northcutt being his best win in MMA so far is not a good sign. It's a huge sign of worry, and that's why people are betting on Salim Touhari in this one. But From what I've seen Touhari, I just don't think that he's going to be able to stop the takedown from Gall in this one. I think that, or no, I don't think that. I saw Touhari get single leg takedown by Baziet in his fight before the UFC. He spent a few minutes on his back, didn't really have an answer getting off of his back, but luckily the referee stood them up for inactivity, and he was able to knock out Baziet with a counter left hook shortly after. So the referee kind of saved him in that one, but he was taken down by a single leg in that one and didn't have an answer to get off of his back. So I think that Gall will be able to take him down, and I think Gall will probably get on the back and get one of his rear naked chokes. And it's not a super confident pick because both of these guys are lower level opponents. Touhari looked better on the regionals and just hasn't really shown his skills yet in the UFC, and he could come out here much improved and really show off his full arsenal that he hasn't gotten to show yet. But I'm going to side with Gall so far. I think he's the more UFC tested guy. He's obviously got the victories in the UFC despite them being over lower level competition. I think that this is a good matchup for Gall. They're trying to get him back on track because they know he's got a little bit of star power behind him because he's been in the limelight with those punk fights and everything. And Touhari, he went 0-2. He looked terrible in both of those fights. I really don't see another reason to give him another fight unless they're looking to benefit another fighter off of a loss from Touhari. So I think that's kind of what the UFC is doing in this one. They're giving one more chance for Touhari, and I wouldn't totally rule out some meme outcome like Touhari knocking out Gall or it being a low output kickboxing decision like Touhari's fights tend to be, but I'm pretty confident that Mickey Gall will get the takedown and get the choke in this one. Moving on to the main card of the afternoon in the light heavyweight division, we have Darko Stosic, who is 13-2, taking on Kennedy Nzechukwu, who is 6-1. The opening betting line for this one was Stosic, the favorite, at -130, with Nzechukwu -110. Right now, we are seeing Stosic -130 and Nzechukwu +110. So two-way action coming in on this fight. A little bit more action on Stosic's way, and I agree with the line movement. The line hasn't moved too much, but I agree with the more money coming in on Stosic's way. And it really comes down to Nzechukwu just being a pretty bad fighter at this point in his career. He fought on the Tuesday Night Contender Series a while back. He was dropped versus Anton Berzin, was almost submitted with a Darce choke in that one, but he used both of his hands to grab onto Berzin's shorts and used an illegal move and was able to escape the choke in that one. Otherwise, I think he honestly would have tapped out. And Berzin gassed out a little bit, and Nzechukwu came back and won round 2 and 3 for that decision. Didn't get signed, won a few fights on the regionals, and came back on the Contender Series and won a fight via knockout. Had a nice left head kick knockout in that one. But his UFC debut against Paul Craig was one of the worst losses that you could ever imagine, where Craig was just desperately pulling guard and shooting sloppy takedowns, and Nzechukwu just couldn't avoid the ground with Craig. He was getting pulled into the guard. He was getting taken down. Just a really bad performance from Nzechukwu. Was put in a deep armbar in round 1, was not able to stuff the shots, and sloppy attempts from Craig. And in round 3, after probably being up on the scorecards, but really not doing any much effective damage, he was scissor sweeped once, almost put in a triangle, was able to escape, and Paul Craig did the exact same move, scissor swept him and triangle choked him, and got the tap out in the 14th minute of the fight. Very Paul Craig-esque win, and it was just a terrible, terrible loss from Nzechukwu. So on the feet, Nzechukwu's got some decent punches. He's got a nice left head kick, but he's a bit chinny. He can be dropped, and his takedown defense and his ground game is just very, very poor. Getting over to Darko Stosic, he's a very short, muscular guy. Has had 2 fights in the UFC so far. One was very defensive and tentative versus Kimball, just waiting for Kimball to make a mistake. Kimball eventually did make that mistake. Stosic reversed position and just pounded him out for an easy ground and pound. I hear some people say that Stosic was losing that fight, but Kimball wasn't doing shit. Stosic was literally just waiting for Kimball to make his own mistakes. Stosic didn't even have to do anything. So Kimball was just bound to fuck up, which he did, and Stosic won. So Stosic's got some very powerful leg kicks, and he's got some decent takedown defense. He's got good get-ups. He digs a real strong underhook, like he did versus Devin Clark. That fight versus Clark, though, it worried me. He was too willing to swing wild combinations on the feet. He looked very uncoordinated when he was swinging those wild combinations. Was actually dropped a few times versus Devin Clark. So he could be a bit chinny. He might have some suspect boxing defense, and he was eventually taken down by Clark in that one. He did get back up and didn't really let Clark dominate the position too much, but in round 3 he just had too low output and didn't do enough and lost that round. Probably lost rounds 1 and 3 and lost that decision versus Dev Clark, but a close fight. So getting down to it on the feet, I don't see Nzechukwu having the power to stop Stosic from coming forward, but Stosic doesn't always come forward. Sometimes he can be too tentative and he can not throw enough. So if Stosic pressures and has solid output, he should win this fight. But if he stays at range and tries to point fight and kickbox, that's when he opens up Nzechukwu's path to victory. And Nzechukwu is just going to look to avoid the takedown, keep the fight on the feet, and look to outstrike Stosic at range. But both of these guys aren't very high level. They both struggle on the ground. But if the fight goes to the floor, I see Stosic being the one hitting the takedowns. He could look to exploit that bad ground game of Nzechukwu, put Nzechukwu on his back and look to knock him out with some ground and pound. But I don't have a super confident pick in this one. I will side with Stosic. He seems to be the more well-rounded. He fought the better competition. He's got the ground game. He doesn't have as glaring holes in his game like Nzechukwu does. So it's mostly a fade on Nzechukwu. Not very confident in Stosic because he has had a bit of a shaky UFC career so far as well. So stay very wary of this fight. It's a low-level competition and anything could happen. So the pick is going to be Stosic to get it done by decision, but not a confident one at all. The next fight takes place in the women's flyweight division. We have Hannah Goldy, who is 5-0, taking on Miranda Granger, who is 6-0. The opening betting line for this one was Goldy minus 130, Granger minus 110. Right now we are seeing Goldy minus 150, Granger plus 130. So both women making their UFC debuts in this one, and both women are moving up from the 115-pound weight class. They're both going up at 10 pounds in weight, and that actually favors Goldy a little bit more because Granger is going to be the smaller woman because Goldy is super muscular. She's absolutely jacked, and she has fought at 125 before, while I do not believe that Miranda Granger has. I believe that all of her fights have taken place at 115 pounds. Might be wrong about that, but I'm almost positive that is the case. So when it comes to size and strength, I expect Goldy to have that advantage in this matchup. And I also expect Goldy to have the boxing advantage in this one because it's not because Granger's boxing isn't good, and it's not like her defense is bad. It's just because she doesn't really throw many punches. I noticed that when watching her fights, she really likes kicking. She comes from a Muay Thai base, and in Muay Thai, they do favor kicks, clinching, knees, elbows over punches. And she really carries that style over to her MMA fights. Granger really just likes to kick, stay outside in range, and clinch. She's really good in the clinch. And I think that Granger, even though she will be out-muscled in this one, can out-technique Goldy in the clinch. And the thing about the clinch is it might look like you can explode out of there or you can muscle your way out, but a good technique in the clinch, you're going to be eating elbows, you're going to be stuck in there, eating knees to the body, and it's very hard to escape that Muay Thai clinch if you've never been in one personally. So Granger is also pretty solid in the submission aspect of things. A lot of her wins have come by way of submission. She's got a good guillotine on the feet. She's clinched up Amy Montenegro against the cage and couldn't get the takedown, wasn't getting taken down herself. It was kind of a back and forth clinch battle on the cage, and she just snatched that guillotine from her feet and got the submission in that one. She took Jamie Colleen down, she was taken down by Jamie Colleen with a single leg takedown, but her guard is super flexible, and she was able to snatch an armbar off of her back. And her last fight was scheduled for 5-minute rounds, but she got the fight over with quickly. She made quick work of her opponent. She got a trip takedown in the clinch, and once again snatched that guillotine and got the submission. So a lot of Granger's victories are coming by way of submission, even though I believe she does come from a Muay Thai background. The one thing I will say worries me about Granger is that she has not fought past the 8 or 9 minute mark in her entire career. She fought 9 minutes on the amateurs, but the longest pro fight that she had was an 8-minute fight. She did win that one, and she won it pretty dominantly. So I don't think that Granger has really been tested. I don't think she's fought an opponent who really gave her a tough time yet. And Goldy has had... She hasn't really faced high-level competition either. Like, she hasn't been losing fights and come back before, but she has fought the full 15 minutes before. She was on Tuesday Night Contender Series against Robbins, who looked like a solid opponent, and definitely gave her a tough outing in that one. So Goldy, she throws a lot of lead leg kicks, and I don't really like that too much. She kind of just flicks the kicks out there. She's circling, good footwork, good movement, but she throws too many weak kicks. Like, she needs to sit down on her kicks and really make sure she means it, because what I noticed about Goldy is her boxing defense is not very good. It does not look like she likes being hit very much, or she's used to being hit. She kind of pulls her head straight back and doesn't have good defense, doesn't really slip punches or block punches too well. She kind of just takes them on the chin or tries to pull her head back, which is a very, very bad habit to have. So on the feet in this one, I think it's going to be a really close fight. I think that they're both going to be leg kicking each other. I don't expect to see too much boxing because neither of them seem too comfortable in the boxing range. I really think that Granger should be the better fighter everywhere, because I think her clinch on the feet is going to be the difference maker in this one. I think that she is overall the more technical striker, but when that clinch comes into play, I think that it's really going to create a big gap on the feet for Granger. And I think Granger can also hit offensive takedowns, and she can possibly get a submission in this one, because in Goldy's fight in the Tuesday Night Contender Series, she was taken down from a body lock clinch and almost got her back taken by Robbins in that one. And she was able to quickly reverse position and get back to her feet and avoid the back take, but it was a risky position. And if Granger was in that same position that Robbins was, I think Granger would have got the hooks in and would have threatened with a rear naked choke. So neither of these women have lost a fight. Goldy does have one amateur loss, but I watched that fight just now, and she won that fight in my opinion. I don't know what the judges were watching. So we got two undefeated women making their UFC debuts. They're going up in weight class. They both have very well-rounded games. I think Granger is the slightly better fighter. I think the clinch is going to make a big difference in this one. And I think that the takedowns will also make a big difference in Granger's favor. The way that Goldy wins this fight is she uses her better boxing. I think she will be the better boxer of the two. She just has more pop behind her punches, and she will be stronger. She could try to use that to her advantage, and she definitely will have the cardio at advantage because she has fought the full 15 minutes. She has fought on the Contender Series. That's a little bit more of a high pressure atmosphere than CFFC, where Granger is coming over from. But both of these women are UFC ready. I'm really happy the UFC added this fight to the card. I'm really looking forward to it because it's really a close matchup. I'm siding with the dog Granger, and I think we'll actually end up on Granger at plus 130 for one unit, because I cap it as a 50-50 type of fight. So if they're saying that her chances are 100 divided by 230, 44%, I disagree with that. It's 50-50. So the value is on Granger, and my pick is going to be Granger to win by submission. The next fight takes place in the lightweight division. We have Joaquim Silva, who is 11-1, taking on Nasrat Haqparast, who is 10-2. The opening betting line for this one was Nasrat, the favorite, at -230, Silva +170. Right now, we are seeing Haqparast -255, Silva +215. So I'm going to call him Nasrat just because I think that Haqparast is a really hard word to pronounce. So getting down to this matchup, it's a really wicked matchup. I can't wait to see this fight play out. Both of these guys are super legit fighters. They're both well-rounded. I would give the striking edge to this one to Haqparast because he is a southpaw with some really good boxing. He's got incredibly fast hands. He's the mini Kelvin Gastelum, as many people call him, because I honestly think that Haqparast's striking might be a little bit better than Gastelum's. Gastelum really just has better power and better accuracy, but when it comes to footwork and cutting off the cage, pressure, output, volume, I think Haqparast actually beats Kelvin Gastelum. It's kind of a superficial correlation I'm making here, but the one thing that I wish Haqparast had a little more of was power, and it seems like he lacks a little bit of power in his strikes because he was clearly outstriking Thea Bugatti the entire fight, the entire 15 minutes of that fight. He had Gotti hurt. He had Gotti gassed out, and he just couldn't finish him. It was insane toughness by Thea Bugatti in that one. And I kind of, I've had this thought about Haqparast's power for a while. And I remember in that fight, I actually bet on not Haqparast inside the distance. So I was worried about the bet beforehand. I knew that Gotti was going to be outgunned, and I knew that he was probably going to lose the fight. I just wanted Gotti to survive, and I swear around the first or second round, I thought the bet was toast, but miraculously, Gotti survived to the full 15 minutes and did not get finished. So Haqparast, his only UFC loss has come by the way of Marcin Held, and he was outboxing Held in that fight, but Held was just relentless with the takedown, finally got the takedown, and then once the fight got to the floor, Held was just able to outgrapple Haqparast, and that's no shame in that for Nasrat, because Held is a world-class grappler, and his jiu-jitsu is really insane. I don't think that Held's jiu-jitsu has been as well adapted to MMA as most fighters, though. I actually think that Joaquim Neto BJJ Silva's jiu-jitsu might be a little bit better suited for MMA than Marcin Held's. So Haqparast was competitive in the grappling versus Held. He defended some some leg lock attempts from Held. He was able to scramble back to his feet, but he was just one step behind Held. Held was just holding on to him and would not let Nasrat free. And I think that that's going to be where Silva has the biggest advantage in this fight, and that's going to be the ground, because Silva does come from that jiu-jitsu background, but he's really fallen in love with the striking. His orthodox boxing is pretty solid, honestly. He does get hit a little bit too much. His boxing defense isn't the best. He was rocked a few times versus Jared Gordon, but this dude's got a chin on him because he keeps coming forward. He recovered quickly from those times he got rocked by Gordon in round one, and actually came back and landed an overhand right and flying knee to close the round versus Gordon, and really evened up that round. Gordon was winning the first 4 minutes or so of that round, and then Silva came back and was able to land the flying knee and make it competitive. It could have been a 10-10 round. He could have even stolen the round. I would actually probably give round one 10-10 because Gordon was winning the first 4 minutes of it, but Silva came back and was almost had the fight finished at the end. If I had to give one fighter 10-9 that round, it would be Gordon, because he won a lot more time of the round. Round two of that fight versus Gordon, Silva's most recent fight, it was another close round. He was stuffing takedowns in round two, but still getting outstruck a little bit. And in the last 30 seconds, Silva blasted a double-leg takedown, got Gordon on his back, and got a tight knee bar locked in. And that thing was totally locked in. It was on the way to tearing Gordon's knee to shreds, but Gordon just toughed it out to the end of the round. And again, another close round where you could give the round 10-10 because Gordon was controlling the first 4 minutes, and then Silva came back the last minute and was close to finishing the fight. If I had to give that round 10-9 to someone, it would be Silva. So in round 3, they were just trading punches, standing and trading, just going back and forth, just absolute haymakers thrown back and forth at each other. It was a crazy, crazy fight, insane round, and Silva just bit down on the mouthpiece and traded and was able to hurt Jared Gordon and get the knockout in round 3. Honestly, one of the best fights of 2018, one of the most underrated fights, and that's why I spent the past minute or two going over it, because it was such a back and forth close fight. And I think that there's a lot of similarities between this fight, and I think like Jared Gordon, I think Haqparast will be the better boxer of the two. He should be outstriking Silva. He should be lighting Silva up on the feet, but Silva is dangerous. He has huge power in his hands. He's got explosive kicks and flying knees and all types of crazy offense, and he can hurt you at any time. So with Haqparast having that lack of power, I think that's why Silva's always going to be dangerous. He's always going to be there to counter possibly and rock Meerschaert, and he's going to have the advantage on the ground. So it really comes down to if Silva pursues the takedown. If Silva chases that takedown and goes for the submission, he knows that his advantage is on the ground in this one. I think that Silva wins the fight. I think that he will probably get the submission on Meerschaert if he's able to get the takedown and keep Meerschaert down. I think that Silva could possibly get a knee bar or leg lock, like similar to the one he landed on Jared Gordon, because Meerschaert ended in a lot of leg lock positions versus marching held. Now, you got to think that if held, the skilled leg locker that he is, if he wasn't able to finish the leg lock versus Meerschaert, then you got to think that Silva won't be able to either. But Silva's just such an opportunistic finisher. He has a crazy will to win, and the way I see this fight going is either Silva inside the distance or Meerschaert decision. So Silva is always going to be there to rock Meerschaert with a punch, possibly knock him out, or rock him and get the submission, try to take him down and get the submission. He doesn't really have the style to win rounds because he's a little bit low output. And the other alternative solution, the more likely solution, would probably be Meerschaert keeping the fight standing, stuffing the takedowns of Silva, avoiding the power shot, and just proceeding to outbox and leg kick Silva, chop him down, and probably light Silva up, maybe even get a late finish. So the pick is going to be Meerschaert, but where the value is at, I think that it's on Silva. And like I said, I don't think Silva has that style to win the round. So the real bet I'm looking at this one is Meerschaert inside the distance, and it's a crazy line, honestly. I think it was plus 517 last time. Plus 650 Meerschaert inside the distance. That's clear value. I would, that's just value bet all day. So that's I'm gonna side with Joaquim Silva. Honestly, I'm gonna believe because I'm betting on him inside the distance. I'm gonna believe just because that's more fun to cheer along that way, and I think that he does have the power and does have the submissions to possibly pull this one off. So I'm gonna side with the big underdog Joaquim Silva to pull off the upset. The next fight, the co-main event of the evening, we have in the lightweight division Clay Guida, who is 35-18, taking on Jim Miller, who is 30-13. The opening betting line was Jim Miller minus 185, Clay Guida plus 145. Right now we are seeing Miller minus 155, Guida plus 135. So a little bit more action coming in Guida's way in this one. And I understand it because where the line was set for Miller minus 185 was a little bit wide. But I like Miller's chances in this fight. And so starting off with Guida, he's been a notorious guy in the UFC for over a decade. He was once famous for his pressure and his wrestling and his but he's really kind of strayed away from that style a lot in the past. He still does pressure. He still does very aggressive and is constantly coming forward, eating punches. But he's really just boxing centric now. His boxing has got a lot better. He was coming off that knockout versus Joe Lozon. Very impressive victory in that one. He had a pretty bad performance against Charles Oliveira where he Oliveira threw some crazy barrage of punches. Guida shelled up and went for some desperate takedown, and Charles Oliveira just snatched his neck easily and tapped him out in round 1. And the really worrisome performance about Guida is versus BJ Penn, his last fight, where he won the fight versus BJ Penn pretty decisively. It was a dominant decision for Guida. I wouldn't say dominant. I would say it was a decisive decision, but it wasn't dominant. Like he didn't dominate like I expected. BJ Penn actually landed a lot of punches on Clay Guida because Guida just constantly moves forward. He doesn't move his head much, and he's just there to be hit. And Penn was jabbing him up. He was landing a few right hands, and he made the fight a lot closer than it had to be. Guida did not have the killer instinct to get BJ out of there. He had BJ hurt a few times. Maybe he was taking it easy on him because BJ is a legend, and he didn't want to, knock him out. But that's a stupid, terrible excuse, because let me tell you something. Jim Miller is a legend too. I'm sure these guys have a lot of respect for each other. It's pretty crazy that they haven't fought before, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if they have fought before and I'm just totally forgetting about it because it was 8 years ago or something like that. Let's check through the record just to make sure we're not crazy here. No, yeah, they haven't fought before, but it's pretty incredible that they haven't been matched up before because Guida did spend a lot of his career at 45, so it's not the most unbelievable thing. So Jim Miller is still, I'd say, the better fighter of the two. He's still got a very nice straight left hand, always had great boxing fundamentals. He's got good takedowns, great jiu-jitsu, great back takes and rear naked chokes. That's really his bread and butter. He's won both of his most recent fights against Alex White and Jason Gonzalez by a rear naked choke. So on the feet, it comes down to, I think that Miller is the better striker right now. I think he's got the better defense. I think that the straight left hand of Jim Miller is going to be a big problem for Guida in this southpaw versus orthodox matchup. I could see Guida pressuring Miller and outboxing him, and the pressure adding up, and Guida running away with it on the scorecards, because Guida's cardio and output is still very solid. But the way I see the fight going is Miller is going to be landing the harder shots on the feet. He's going to be tagging Guida with that straight left hand down the middle. And I think that Miller will be able to outstrike Guida on the feet. But really where Miller should have the big advantage is the grappling. And even though Guida comes from that wrestling background and has great defensive grappling, great defensive wrestling, he has notoriously struggled with submissions. Most of his losses in his career has come by way of submission. And he just makes a lot of mistakes in the cage still. He fights very emotionally and untechnically at times, and I think that Miller is just the higher IQ fighter at this point. I think he's still got the better skills. He's more technical, more polished, and I see it somewhere along the line Guida making a mistake, Jim Miller getting the takedown, taking his back, and getting the rear naked choke. So I'm going to pick Miller to get it done. I just said rear naked choke, but I don't think that he will submit him. I think that Miller mixes it up with the striking and the grappling and just outworks Clay Guida for the 15 minutes, and the pick is going to be Jim Miller to get it done by decision. And in the main event of the evening in the welterweight division, we have Colby Covington, who is 14-1, taking on Robbie Lawler, who is 28-13. The opening betting line for this one was Covington minus 175, Lawler plus 135. Since then, more action coming in on Covington. He's now minus 245, Lawler plus 205. So I agree with the line movement in this one. It is a good matchup for Colby Covington. He was the former interim champion, has not fought since his fight with Rafael dos Anjos around 13 or 14 months ago. He won that fight via unanimous decision. It was a great performance, but that fight was a lot closer than people remember. The first time I watched it, I thought it was 49-46 Colby. The second time I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, it's still 49-46. The second time, it was maybe it could be 48-47 Colby, and it's just a lot closer fight than people expected because Colby was pressuring RDA and he was getting takedowns, but RDA was bouncing back to his feet. He was landing the better strikes at distance, and RDA was actually landing some good strikes in the clinch while they were against the cage too. So that made it a lot closer fight than you think. Now, Colby did out-hustle RDA. He was able to jockey for top position a little bit more, was able to ride the back of RDA, get some takedowns and a little bit of top position, and ultimately win the rounds and the fight. His cardio and his pressure, his output looked great in that fight. It was a great performance, and I still do believe that Colby won the fight, but it was a lot closer than a lot of people remembered. And Colby, the fight before that was against Damian Maia. A lot different style fight where he was sprawling and brawling in that fight, where he was content to strike with Maia for a little bit because he was waiting for Maia's takedown. While Covington is usually the guy hitting his own offensive takedowns, he's not going to do that against Damian Maia because Damian Maia is a wizard on the ground. So his game plan in that fight was to just strike with Maia, wait for the takedown to come from Maia, and sprawl and brawl, and that worked well. He lost round 1. He was getting lit up with some punches in round 1, got cut a little bit, but rounds 2 and 3, Covington pushed up the pace. He was stuffing takedowns. He was landing ground and pound, and by the end of round 3, Covington beat Damian Maia within an inch of his life. So a lot of people will bring up that point. Covington was getting touched by Damian Maia. Well, it's a 100% different type of fight. He was content to strike with Maia, while he will not be content to strike with Robbie Lawler in this fight. So, and then another impressive performance I'm going to bring up of Covington was his fight against Bryan Barberena, where Barberena is a guy with solid takedown defense and good cardio, and Covington just out-hustled him, repeatedly took Barberena down, rode his back, and completely dominated Barberena in that fight. So Covington is a great fighter. I really like his style of fight, and I really think that he should be the one next in line for Kamaru Usman, and that presents an incredible stylistic matchup because they both kind of have the same style. I think that Kamaru is just a little bit better at it and has the better striking of the two. But that's a different matchup for a different day. Right now in front of him is Robbie Lawler, the former welterweight champion, one of the most violent fighters to ever fight in MMA. Got incredible striking, still good power on the feet. He's got pretty decent takedown defense. He is good at defending takedowns at range. He's good at defending takedowns against the cage. He had some success defending takedowns against Johnny Hendricks there. But when he's out in the middle, in the center of the octagon, he is not so good at defending takedowns. And it's interesting because that is the opposite of RDA. RDA is good at defending takedowns in the center of the cage, and he kind of struggles against the cage. So that's why Colby decided to pressure RDA against the cage and try to take him down that way. While if Colby was smart, he would watch Lawler's takedown defense versus against the cage versus at range, and see that Lawler is a little bit better against the cage. So maybe Colby will look to mix up his takedown attempts or his takedown entries to this fight. So Lawler's last fight was against Ben Askren, very notorious fight. Askren shot a sloppy single leg in the beginning of the fight. Lawler picked him up and slammed him on his head, landed huge ground and pound, and was seconds away from knocking Askren out, but Askren recovered, held on to Lawler, cleared his head, was able to get back to his feet, and was able to push Robbie against the cage, and was able to get the body lock trip takedown, and he tried to get up right away, left his neck out, and that's when the infamous bulldog controversial stoppage happened. But in my opinion, Lawler went out for a second there. Askren had the choke locked in. It was a very dangerous position. Lawler's hand dropped in a very worrisome way, and Herb Dean, the referee, had to step in my opinion, for that fight. So that was a loss, a legitimate loss for Lawler in that fight. And it was weird because he had Askren hurt so bad. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds left in the fight, he was smashing Askren's face into the canvas with massive ground and pound, and then not even 45 seconds later, he was backed up against the cage and defending takedowns from Askren, because Lawler has this nasty tendency of backing himself up against the cage. He has really done it kind of throughout his entire career, and he has really paid for it in the past few years. He did it against Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley cut him off and landed that knockout bomb. He was constantly pressured against the cage versus RDA and was outstruck, outclinched, outgrappled in that 5-round fight. And but that was eventually what led to his demise against Askren. He got pushed against the cage, taken down, and choked out against the cage. So Lawler, although he is a very notorious fighter, he's one of the best, honestly, one of the best fighters ever in terms of just his aggression, his will to fight, his love of fighting. He's just a true fighter's fighter, and you gotta love and respect Robbie Lawler. But don't let that distract you from the fact that the guy is a flawed fighter. He does have some weaknesses. The worst being backing himself against the cage and being put on his back and being outgrinded by wrestlers. That has happened throughout his career, and that's why Colby Covington is a nightmare matchup for him. So Colby, I would be interested to see Colby's how he's going to approach the takedowns in this fight, because if he pushes Lawler against the cage and he takes Lawler down against the cage and gets the body lock and rides him out from top and does that typical Colby Covington style, I think he has a good chance of winning the fight that way. But I just think that he would be better off shooting double legs, single legs, knee tap takedowns, something like that at range, because you got to mix it up with Robbie Lawler. He comes from a good gym in Hard Knocks 365. His coaches are going to be watching tape left and right. And if Colby comes in here with the same type of takedown entries he does always, Lawler is going to be prepared for them. He was prepared for Askren's sloppy single leg entries, and he picked him up and dropped him on his head. So this fight is very, very interesting. It's going to be a close matchup. For the first 2 rounds, I see it being really close. And it really just decides on how Colby pursues the takedowns. A good idea from Robbie Lawler would be to keep his hands low from the jump, because he doesn't have to be too worried about getting rocked from a punch versus Colby, because Colby doesn't have the best striking, and he certainly doesn't have the best power in his strike. So if Robbie keeps his hands nice and low and starts attacking body punches early, this does one of multiple things. He has his hands low to defend the takedowns from Colby that are inevitably coming. He's going to start taking away some of the gas tank of Colby Covington, because Covington can take a shot. He does have a pretty solid chin, and he will just keep coming forward nonstop for 25 minutes. His cardio is off the charts. But if you attack the body, you have a better chance at weakening his gas tank. And the last but not least of the reason is that he can avoid over swinging on wild punches versus Colby Covington, because Colby kind of likes when you swing wild, because he'll level change off of your combinations of punches. So if Lawler isn't headhunting and swinging big bombs trying to knock Covington's head off, and he's just digging to the body early, just taking small shots at the body, taking out that gas tank, that's a much better game plan, and it'll be easier for him to avoid the takedown of Colby. But this fight is only really close for the first 2 rounds, in my opinion, because Lawler has a short window to do damage to Colby at range. He's going to have to hurt Colby with a punch on the feet. He's going to have to hurt him with any type of strike, because if Colby is able to start grappling, he's able to start pressuring and getting his game plan going, then Colby's going to run away with the fight. He's going to drain out Robbie Lawler's gas tank. He's going to continue to hit takedowns. He's going to be in top position the entire time, landing big ground and pound on Robbie Lawler. Colby's not really the typical type of grappler where he looks for standard top positions like side control or mount, or going for getting the back, taking your back, going for submissions. He likes riding on top from very unique positions. They're like wrestler positions, where he'll take you down and he'll Dagestani handcuff you and punch you in the face from top position with no hooks in. He's got a very unique ground and pound style, a very unique top position style. So it's going to be a great fight. I really can't wait to see it. Both of these guys are, incredible welterweights. Colby Covington coming off of that long layoff. Robbie Lawler coming off of that controversial stoppage versus Ben Askren. It's a great matchup. It's a great fight. I'm really looking forward to it. So the way I see the path to victory I see for Robbie Lawler is hurting Covington early, stuffing the shots early, and trying to land a strike that hurts Colby and trying to knock Colby out in the early rounds. the way Colby's going to do it is he's going to look to pressure right off the bat. He's going to look to put Lawler against the cage or look to take him down at range, look to put Lawler on his back, start getting top position, just grinding out Lawler. It's going to just make it an ugly, could even possibly be a boring fight where he just rides out Lawler. And Lawler stays tight defensively. He's constantly in the fight. He's not giving up, but he is just one step behind Colby Covington the entire fight. So that's probably the most likely scenario I see, is that Colby Covington wins by decision, and he's just going to, the margin of defeat is going to get bigger and bigger. I see round 1 being close and round 2 being less close, and Colby really starting to run away with it rounds 3, 4, and 5 because his cardio and his pace is just too much to deal with, and I don't think that Lawler can deal with it at this point in his career. Maybe 3 to 4 years ago when he was his champion and was on his incredible career resurgence, but if you look at what Lawler has done in the past few years, he got knocked out versus Woodley in 2016. He had a very close decision with Donald Cerrone in 2017. He lost the dominant decision to Dos Anjos in 17, and then he took all of 2018 off to recover his knee, and then came back versus Askren. Had some early success early, but was eventually finished in that fight too. So Lawler hasn't had too much success lately in the octagon, and he is due for a win. He still looks very hungry. He looks in great shape. He looked absolutely shredded versus Askren, but it still wasn't enough to stop him. And I see that being the case here. I think that Colby will avoid the knockout early. He will start taking Robbie Lawler down early in the rounds, and just the top position, the ground and pound, the takedowns, they're going to add up. And I see Colby Covington running away with the decision in this one. 49-46 is going to be the official prediction for the main event in this one. But it's going to be a great fight. Robbie Lawler is certainly a live dog in this one. Where the money line value is at right now, it's going to be a pass on both ends. The play for me was Robbie Lawler inside the distance at plus 300, because I think that Lawler has really little chance of winning a decision at all. I think if Lawler wins this fight, it is by knockout. So Lawler inside the distance plus 300, that's a good line. I got that early. I don't think it's as good of a line right now. Lawler by TKO is plus 325 right now on 5 dimes. So that's a solid line. I'm really looking forward to the fight. I'm picking Colby Covington by decision, and that is going to do it for the 12-fight breakdown. But one thing I want to mention before I get going is DraftKings, because I have been getting into DraftKings lately. I've done it for, I think, the past 3 or 4 events, and I've won on all 3 or 4 events, too. So I've been really enjoying it. It's a little bit different than your traditional betting, and I'm just going to go over the my salaries for this card. So my first lineup I got going on, we're going to start with the most expensive fighters. I'm picking Scott Holtzman as a 9,300 salary. I think that he will get the finish on Dong Hyun Ma, and if he doesn't, he should put on a dominant, high-scoring performance. Otherwise, we got Colby Covington at the $9,000 salary. I think he will put on a dominant decision, where he's likely to hit a ton of takedowns, and he's liable to land a lot of ground and pound as well. Possibly even getting a late finish if he's able to accumulate damage. For the $8,600 salary, we got Antonina Shevchenko. I'm picking her to land a lot of strikes in the clinch and at range and just outstrike Pudilova to a decision. For the $8,000 price tag, we got Matt Schnell. I think that he has a great chance at finishing Espinosa, and even if he doesn't, he should put up some good numbers in a close competitive decision. $7,900, we got Mickey Gall. I think that's a really great price for him. I think that she does certainly have the chance at shitting the bed, making it a low output decision, possibly even getting knocked out by Touhari, but the most likely path to victory for Mickey Gall I see is the submission. So I like his price at $7,900. And lastly, I got Joaquim Silva at $7,100, and that's a great salary. I think that he is a very live dog. I think he has a decent chance at finishing Nasrat Haqparast in this one, and that's why I like him at the price that he's at. Going over some of the other salaries of the people, Claudio Silva at $9,400. I wouldn't tell you to stay away from that play because he probably will get the submission, but I think Holtzman is just much more likely to deliver on the points. Meerschaert, I would not pay that 9,100, although he is liable to rack up a lot of points, just outboxing Silva in this one. I just don't like his price. I think because I think Silva has a good chance of pulling off the upset. Jim Miller 8,900. That's a little too steep for me. I think he has a chance at only putting up maybe 40, 50, 60 points in a decision victory over Guida, although he could get the finish and his price could pay off. Let's see. I'll go through and Hannah Goldy. Total pass on her at 8,800. I do not see her paying off that price tag at all. Same with Mara Romero Borella at 8,700. I do not see her paying off that price tag. Even if she wins, she might win by submission and she might pay off that tag. But I see her grinding out top position with takedowns and ground and pound and not being worth 8,700. Giles, don't trust him for 8,500. Don't think he has a great chance at finishing. He might, but just don't like the price tag. Stosic, 8,400. I don't knock Giles or Stosic. They're decent plays for 8,500 and 8,400, but I don't love them. Touhari total pass at 83. Espinosa total pass at 82. And Nzechukwu total pass at 78. He's not going to put up anything. Meerschaert total pass. Yeah, I think he loses this fight. Granger at 7,400. That's a great price tag. I think she has a great chance of pulling off the upset. Pass on Guida, pass on Lawler, pass on Murphy, pass on Ma, and of course pass on Cole Williams. So maybe I'll get more into DraftKings, start analyzing that a little more, maybe incorporating it into all of my breakdowns. But for now, I'm just breezing through at the end just to give you guys my quick thoughts on the DK this week. So that's gonna do it for episode 70 of the Martian MMA podcast. Hope you all enjoy the podcast. Hope you all enjoy the card from Newark this weekend, and I will see you all next week before UFC Uruguay. Peace.